The millionaire was startled by a call from his daughter while on a business trip. The little girl tearfully choked, "Dad, Mommy has been arrested and taken to jail," which sent him into a panic. But when he rushed to the location, the sight before him caused him to collapse because the person behind bars was... The 60-ton behemoth reared up, crushing the intricate chassis of the supercar beneath it, twisting and shattering the expensive metal fragments. Ryan Davis clearly felt the violent vibration transfer through the control stick, spreading down his arm and stimulating every taut nerve. He had just signed a $3 billion merger deal, and the act of turning luxury toys into scrap metal was his way of asserting his position, a game changer. Through the thick bulletproof glass, Ryan saw the crowd of partners and stunning models cheering and raising their glasses in congratulations. They looked at him like a king, but Ryan didn't care in the slightest. He shifted the lever about to continue crushing the next obstacle when a bright red dot on the control panel on the right flashed repeatedly. The emergency satellite phone. The hotline was reserved only for Charlotte. The exhilaration of the conqueror vanished, replaced by the instinct of a father. Ryan turned off the engine. The roaring machine gradually subsided into a stifling silence. He removed his leather gloves, reached for the phone, and a slight curve touched his lips. By now in Chicago, Charlotte was probably eager to show off a new doll or was whining for her father to buy her a pony. "What gift do you want, Princess?" Ryan put the phone to his ear, expecting the familiar ringing laughter. But the response was a chaotic void. Echoing sirens, the heavy thump of footsteps on hard tile, and the dry metallic clang of objects hitting each other slammed against his eardrum. "Daddy." Charlotte's voice was fractured small and drowned out by the noisy background. There was no coaxing, only raw fear. "Charlotte. Where are you? Why is it so loud? Please come home, Dad. Mommy's locked up." The child's choked sobs broke up her sentence. "Someone put handcuffs on Mommy onto an iron chair. She's crying a lot." The smile on Ryan's face froze. He gripped the phone, trying to process the absurd words he'd just heard. Karen was in the safest penthouse in Chicago, protected by a state-of-the-art security system and a professional household staff. Handcuffs, iron chair. Those things did not belong in his wife's world. "Calm down and tell Daddy. Is Mommy Karen playing a game with you?" "No." "Not Mommy Karen," Charlotte wailed, her cries heartbreaking. "It's Mommy Mary." Mommy Mary was taken by the police officer. "I'm so scared, Daddy." The unfamiliar name Mary struck Ryan's mind like a punch. Karen was gone. A strange woman named Mary was arrested, and his daughter was in some police station instead of at home. A chilling sensation ran down Ryan's spine, sweeping away the scorching heat of the desert. "I'm coming home to you right now. Wait for me a little bit." Ryan didn't wait for an answer. He violently tossed his helmet onto the floor of the vehicle, kicking open the cockpit door. He jumped down from the massive machine, ignoring the astonished looks of the crowd approaching to congratulate him. "Get out of the way!" Ryan brushed aside a congratulatory glass of champagne offered by a partner and sprinted toward the helipad. The arrogant look of the millionaire vanished, replaced by the utter panic of a father who had lost his child. He leaped into the cabin, signaling to the resting pilot. "Start the engine. Fly back to Chicago, right now." "But sir, we haven't checked the mechanics or filed for a flight plan." "I said fly now, or you'll be fired before the rotor even turns." The helicopter engine roared. The blades began to slice into the air, creating swirling gusts of wind that obscured visibility with thick dust. Ryan sat in the cabin, hands tightly clasped together to stop the trembling, staring intently at the distant horizon. The phone in his hand had lost signal, but Charlotte's cries about the locked-up mother still echoed in his ears, signaling a terrible storm waiting for him on the other side of the sky. The desert dust had receded, replaced by gray clouds indicating they were nearing the north. The monotonous ringing tone continued, ending with the automated voice announcing a full voicemail box. Ryan bit his lip patiently, calling a second, then a third time. Still only absolute silence from his wife's side. Karen never turned off her phone, especially knowing he was on a business trip and might call at any moment to check in. This silence was not like her at all. It carried a bad omen. Ryan redirected the call home. After 3 rings, the shaky voice of the housekeeper answered. "Mr. Davis, you're back. Where is Karen? Why can't I reach her? Where is Charlotte?" The line went silent for a long moment, only the sound of hurried breathing. "Sir, the mistress took Miss Charlotte out a long time ago. Out where the weather in Chicago is below freezing and Charlotte has a slight fever. Who gave her permission to take the child out? I tried to stop her, sir. I told her the little girl needed medicine and rest, but the mistress, she said the child needed some fresh air. She drove out herself, not letting me or the chauffeur follow. She said she wanted some private time with her daughter." Ryan hung up his hand, clenched into a fist. Private time with his daughter. A clumsy lie. The image of Karen reappeared in his mind, clearer and more stark than ever. 2 years ago, he married her for her glamorous appearance and social grace qualities, perfect for the position of a large corporation's wife. But behind that facade was a carefully nurtured narcissistic soul. He recalled the times Charlotte ran to her wanting her mother to read a story, and Karen would just frown at her freshly painted nails, then call the nanny to take the child away, afraid of staining her expensive silk dress. The idea of Karen personally taking care of her sick child was unthinkable. Her taking the child out on a severe winter afternoon was even more irrational. Ryan dialed the personal line of the Chicago police chief reserved for VIP donors. Chief Miller speaking. "This is Ryan Davis. My daughter Charlotte just called saying she is at the police station. What the devil's going on, Miller? Where is my wife?" The prolonged silence on the other end made Ryan even more anxious. "Mr. Davis, we are indeed holding young Charlotte at Precinct 1. The child is safe, and medical personnel have done a preliminary check. But as for your wife, was she in an accident or kidnapped? The matter is more complicated than that, sir. I cannot provide details over the phone. It's best if you come here right away. We require the presence of a legal guardian." Complicated? Are you kidding me? My wife takes my daughter for a walk, and now my child is at the police station and my wife is nowhere to be found. Tell me now, is Karen there? No, sir. Mrs. Davis is not here. Miller's brief answer in evasive manner added fuel to the fire. Ryan slammed the phone down, the sense of unease gradually shifting to suspicion and anger. If Karen was not in an accident and not with her child, then where was she? Why did she leave her 5-year-old daughter alone to deal with the police? Ryan opened his tablet, accessing the home security camera system. The screen split into 4 small windows. The living room was empty. The kitchen was dark. He switched to the GPS tracking app secretly installed on Karen's sports car, a security measure she was unaware of. The red location dot flashed on the Chicago city map. It wasn't moving. Ryan zoomed in on the map. The car's location was an outdoor public parking lot near an old commercial center in the suburbs. The data showed the car had been parked there for 4 hours. That area was more than 20 miles from his home, a place Karen once scorned as a slum and swore never to set foot in for shopping. Why did she drive there this afternoon? And if the car was there, why was Charlotte at the Central Police Station? A terrible hypothesis began to form in Ryan's head. There was no kidnapping. There was no accident. The car was sitting there motionless and cold, just like the conscience of its owner. Karen and Charlotte were not together. She had gone somewhere, leaving the car, and worse, possibly leaving Charlotte behind. The lie hidden behind the phrase "went out for fresh air" was now revealed as a brutal abandonment. Ryan felt the blood rush to his face. He had entrusted his daughter to a heartless woman. Ryan threw the tablet hard onto the leather seat beside him. "Step on it. We need to be in Chicago in 30 minutes. Sir, there's a very thick storm front ahead. Visibility is almost zero. We must circle around or decrease altitude. I don't care about the storm. Fly through it. I need to see my daughter now." Ryan roared, drowning out the engine noise. The The pilot dared not argue, pushing the stick forward. The helicopter shook violently as it plunged into the turbulent air pocket. Black clouds engulfed the windows, swallowing the helicopter into their belly. Ryan looked out, seeing only a dense curtain of night. Beneath that thick layer of clouds, the city of Chicago was lighting up, and somewhere in that maze of light, a brutal truth about his marriage and family was waiting to be exposed, starting with a wrong decision made 6 hours earlier. 6 hours before the storm of truth hit Ryan. The dazzling red-violet Porsche, blindingly conspicuous among the old brick buildings of the suburbs, braked sharply in front of a deserted commercial center. Karen didn't turn off the engine, her hands with their elaborate red manicures, hurriedly adjusting her eyeliner in the rearview mirror. She pursed her lips, checking her vibrant red lipstick one last time, completely ignoring the small shivering reflection in the back seat. "Get out of the car." Karen opened the driver's door. The cold wind blasted into the warm cabin, making Charlotte shiver and cough a few times. Karen grimaced, not out of worry but out of fear that germs would stick to the evening gown she was hiding beneath her fur coat. She walked around, opened the car door, and lifted Charlotte out abruptly. "Mommy, I'm cold. Where are we going?" "Don't ask so many questions. I have something important to do. You sit here and wait." Karen firmly placed the little girl on the cold stone bench beneath the bus stop awning. The chill from the stone seeped through her thin clothes straight into Charlotte's skin. Karen pulled the tablet from her handbag and thrust it into the child's hand. "Play your game. I'll go inside to get something quickly. Just 15 minutes. Charlotte looked up at her stepmother with wide, tear-filled eyes. The neighborhood was deserted. The surrounding stores were all silently closed, only the sound of the wind whistling through broken window panes. "I'm scared. Can I go with you, Mommy? No, that place is not for children. Sit still. If you dare to step off this spot, the boogeyman will come and get you. The boogeyman likes to take naughty children who don't listen to their mother." Charlotte huddled, clutching the tablet like the only shield protecting her from the threat. Karen was satisfied to see that fear had locked the child onto the bench. She waved to a taxi that was just pulling up, got in, and slammed the door shut. The Porsche remained parked there, silent like a sleeping red monster, a perfect decoy for anyone looking for her whereabouts. The taxi disappeared after the intersection. Charlotte sat alone in the vast, cold space. The Chicago winter wind began to blow harder, carrying the first snowflakes to fall sparsely onto the black pavement. The white snowflakes clung to Charlotte's hair and shoulders, melting into icy water that soaked her skin. Time crawled by, agonizingly slow. 15 minutes turned into 30 minutes, then an hour. The tablet screen dimmed, then went dark. Charlotte pressed the power button repeatedly, but in vain. The only shield was gone, leaving only darkness and the cold invading every finger and toe. The low-grade fever from the afternoon began to flare up, making her head spin. "Mommy. Daddy." Charlotte sobbed, her tiny cries swallowed by the wind. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks and quickly turned icy. She remembered the story of the little match girl that Daddy Ryan used to read to her about the matchsticks that flared up, then went out in the winter night. From the dark alley, adjacent to the commercial center, reeking of trash, the clatter of wheels sounded. An old supermarket cart piled high with plastic bottles and cardboard rolled onto the street. The person pushing the cart was a young woman, her slender figure lost in oversized loose clothes. Mary stopped, her hands chapped from the elements gripping the cart handle tightly. Mary's large but sorrowful eyes settled on the stone bench. She saw a child sitting there trembling like a dry leaf in the wind. The image was like a knife plunging straight into Mary's heart, stirring up the painful memory she always tried to bury. 5 years ago, in a poor village in Mexico, her younger brother had passed away on a cold night like this due to a lack of warm blankets and medicine. That heartache had pushed her to cross the border into the U.S. with the hope of a better life, only to be cheated out of her money and papers, becoming a lurking shadow on the fringe of this glamorous society. Mary looked around. No one. Her survival instinct told her to leave immediately. An undocumented immigrant like her could not afford to get involved in trouble, especially with a well-dressed white child. But Mary's legs refused to obey. She saw Charlotte's bluish lips, saw the little chest rising and falling with difficulty. Little baby cold. No mother here, Mary whispered in broken English, abandoning her cart, her only possession, on the roadside. She approached the stone bench. Charlotte flinched, shrinking back when she saw the stranger, her eyes wide with fear. Don't be scared. I won't hurt you. Mary sat down without hesitation, taking off her thick wool coat. It was the only layer of protection helping her endure the harsh Chicago winter, her mobile home. The sudden chill hitting her thin body made Mary shiver, but she quickly wrapped the coat around Charlotte. The smell of trash and road dust clinging to the coat made Charlotte wrinkle her nose, but the immediate warmth radiating from the thick fabric drove away the bone-deep cold. Mary pulled Charlotte into her embrace, using her little remaining body heat to warm the strange child. She took Charlotte's icy hands, gently massaging them to restore circulation. Warm. Warm now, Mary whispered, beginning to sing a lullaby in Spanish. The sad, soft melody resonated amidst the whistling wind. Charlotte stopped crying. The fever and the sudden warmth made the little girl drowsy. In her delirium, she no longer saw the ragged stranger, but only felt a tight embrace, a gentle voice, something she had longed for so long from her cold stepmother. Charlotte burrowed deep into Mary's arms, resting her head on the young woman's chest, listening to the strong, warm heartbeat. Mommy. The call came out instinctively, tiny but enough to make Mary freeze. Tears streamed from the young woman's eyes, falling onto Charlotte's golden hair. In that moment on the cold winter night, two lonely souls found each other. Hey, what is that woman doing with the kid? A rude shout shattered the brief, peaceful atmosphere. A group of passers-by had just emerged from the nearby tavern, pointing toward the stone bench. Under the yellow streetlights, all they saw was a filthy, homeless person tightly holding a well-dressed child. Let go of her. Call the police. She's kidnapping the child. Mary looked up in panic. She wanted to explain, to say that the child was cold, but her throat was choked. The constant fear of the police and deportation paralyzed her. She only knew to hold Charlotte tighter as a reflex to protect her daughter from the stranger's attack. The screech of sirens ripped through the quiet night, getting closer and closer. Flashing blue and red lights swept across the brick walls, then shone directly into Mary's eyes, blinding her. Two patrol cars braked abruptly in front of the bus stop. Doors flew open, police hands up. Step away from the child. Two large police officers rushed in. One roughly grabbed Mary's shoulder, yanking her back. The other officer scooped Charlotte out of her arms. The warmth vanished, the cold rushing back more brutally than ever. Mary was thrown onto the icy, snow-covered ground, her face pressed against the hard, frozen pavement. No, don't hurt her, Mary screamed in Spanish, struggling in desperation. The dry clang of metal echoed. Icy handcuffs locked tightly around Mary's thin wrists behind her back. She was hauled up, pushed roughly toward the police car. Through blurred tears, Mary still craned her neck, her desperate gaze following Charlotte, who was wailing and reaching out toward her. Ryan Davis forcefully pushed open the glass door of the Chicago precinct. Cold wind swept in with his steps, scattering flyers on the reception desk, startling the officer on duty. Ryan no longer had the impeccable appearance of a millionaire who had just signed a billion-dollar deal. His designer suit was rumpled, his tie was askew, and his hair was windblown from the helicopter rotor. His breathing was ragged, exhaling cloudy white plumes into the cold air that reeked of stale coffee and administrative paperwork. He ignored the curious stares of the onlookers, his red eyes quickly scanning the cluttered room. In the corner of the waiting room, on a long, worn wooden bench, a small figure was huddled. Ryan stopped short, his heart constricted with a sharp pang of pain. It was Charlotte, but not the little princess in a red velvet dress he had imagined. The child was swallowed up in an old, oversized wool coat, the sleeves so long they covered her hands. The coat was a dull brown, frayed at the collar, and cuffs emitting the musty odor characteristic of dark alleys, utterly foreign to the world of expensive perfumes of the Davis family. Charlotte Ryan rushed over his knee, hitting the hard tile floor as he knelt before his daughter. He opened his arms, wrapping them around the small, trembling body. "Daddy's here. Daddy's back with you. Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Charlotte looked up. Her face was streaked with tears, her lips dry and cracked. Seeing her father, she burst into heart-wrenching sobs, her cries breaking through all the repression she had held back until now. But instead of clinging to Ryan's neck and demanding to go home as he expected, her small hands lightly struggled, pushing his shoulder away. "Daddy. Mommy Mary. Save Mommy Mary." Daddy Charlotte's finger pointed directly toward the temporary holding area, separated by a thick pane of reinforced glass. "Mommy Mary gave me her coat. She's very cold. The police officers took her. Daddy tell them to let her go." Ryan was stunned, slowly turning his head to follow his daughter's gaze. Through the glass, which reflected the blinding white fluorescent lights, he saw a young woman sitting huddled in the corner of the holding cell. She was painfully thin, wearing only a thin frayed sweater, her shoulders shaking with constant shivers. That was Mary. Not a harsh old woman, nor a ferocious kidnapper. Just a young woman about the age of the interns at his company, with large, sad eyes furtively looking out. Mary wasn't soliciting attention. She wasn't pounding on the door or screaming. She just sat there trembling against the cold of the cell, her anxious gaze fixed on Charlotte being held by her father. When she saw Ryan looking at her, she quickly bowed her head, her shoulders hunching even more as if wanting to disappear into the gray wall. "Mr. Davis." A deep voice sounded from behind. Police Chief Miller emerged from his office holding a tablet. He placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, signaling gently. "We need to talk for a moment. Let the child calm down." Ryan kissed Charlotte's forehead, whispering a promise to return immediately, then stood up and followed Miller to a secluded corner near the coffee machine where Charlotte could not overhear their conversation. "Where is my wife? Why was my child with that woman?" "Calm down, Mr. Davis. What you are about to see might be very difficult to accept." Miller turned on the tablet screen and handed it to Ryan. A black and white video excerpt from the bus stop security camera appeared. Ryan held his breath watching. The familiar Porsche pulled up. Karen got out, her demeanor hurried, showing absolutely no concern for the child accompanying her. She lifted Charlotte and set her down on the cold stone bench, shoved the tablet into her hand, and walked straight away. Not a single look back, not a loving word of instruction. Only the cold cruelty of a person wanting to shed a burden. The car sat there as a testament to indifference, while Karen's shadow faded after the intersection, heading for a party. Ryan clenched his fist, his fingernails digging deep into his skin. Anger flared in his chest, burning hot. He had brought a demon into his home without realizing it. The video continued to play. Snow began to fall. Charlotte huddled. Then Mary appeared. The young woman in the cell, whom he had just regarded with suspicion, did what his wife would not. She didn't hesitate to take off her only coat, the last layer of protection between her and the cold, to wrap around his daughter. She sat down on the snowy pavement, holding Charlotte tightly in her arms, using her body heat to warm the strange child for hours. Ryan saw Mary massaging Charlotte's hands, saw her leaning down to whisper something, and saw Charlotte burrowing into her arms, peaceful, as if in her mother's embrace. Ryan's throat was tight. A deep sense of remorse and gratitude welled up, mixed with fury directed at Karen. That homeless woman who was unjustly imprisoned and freezing in the cell had saved his daughter's life, while his legal wife had abandoned the child to danger. Ryan handed the tablet back to Miller, his hand trembling. "Let her go. Right now. She's not a criminal. We know Mr. Davis, but the procedure. I don't care about the procedure. She is my family's benefactor. If you don't open that iron door in the next 5 minutes, I will..." The precinct's main door suddenly flew open, interrupting Ryan's threat. The sharp click of high heels on the tile floor echoed loudly, shattering the tense atmosphere. The overpowering smell of perfume, surged in, masking the scent of stale coffee. Ryan spun around. His eyes blazed, staring intently at the woman who had just entered with a feigned look of panic, followed by her personal lawyer clutching a briefcase. Karen had arrived. The precinct door flew open and Karen stepped in with a false smile, unaware that Ryan now held the evidence that would destroy her. Would the mask of the wicked stepmother be ripped off? And what would Ryan do to protect Mary, the wrongfully detained benefactor? The strong scent of Chanel perfume couldn't cover up the smell of cheap gin and cigarette smoke clinging to Karen's wrinkled evening gown. She stumbled through the glass door, her high heels tapping loudly on the floor, sounding out of place in the solemn atmosphere of the police station. Following Karen was her personal lawyer, with a tense expression, the man who had just struggled to bail her out of a nightclub raid 30 minutes ago. The moment she saw Ryan's towering silhouette in the lobby, the alcohol-hazed look in Karen's eyes flashed with alarm. She immediately changed her expression, shifting from indifference to the pitiful appearance of a mother who had just endured a nightmare. "Ryan, thank God you're back. I've been worried sick." Karen rushed forward, her arms outstretched toward Charlotte, who was clinging to her father's back as crocodile tears began to well up at the corners of her eyes. "Charlotte, my poor darling, where have you been? I've been looking all over for you." Ryan didn't say a word. He took a long, decisive, and powerful step forward, completely blocking Karen's view. His broad back formed a steel wall absolutely separating the alcohol-reeking woman from the trembling child. Karen stopped short, her hands suspended in midair, stunned by her husband's icy rejection. "Stay away from her." From behind her father's back, Charlotte peered out. Her tear-stained face was flushed with anger and fear. The innocent eyes that once looked at Karen with a longing for affection now held only alienation. "Go away. You're not my mom. You left me in the cold. You told me to sit there and wait for the boogeyman." Charlotte's tiny scream echoed through the hall, sharp as a knife cutting into the silence. The officers on duty all stopped working, turning to stare at the elegantly dressed but cruel-acting woman. The accusation of a 5-year-old child carried more weight than any indictment. Karen's face turned ashen. She stammered, her eyes darting around for an excuse. "No, Charlotte, what are you talking about? I just got lost. I went to find help." "Ryan, you have to believe me, the child is talking nonsense because she has a fever." "Lost your way to a secret bar in the South Side." Ryan held up the tablet still playing the video clip from the security camera. He thrust the brightly lit screen close to Karen's face, forcing her to confront the naked truth she was trying to hide. On the screen, the image of Karen coldly abandoning the child on the stone bench and walking away appeared clearly, brutally, and undeniably. "Look, Karen, look closely. Is this how you went to find help? You left my daughter in the sub-zero snow to go party. You left a homeless woman to take off her coat to save the child's life while you were raising a glass of celebratory champagne." Karen looked at the video, her lips trembling, unable to utter a word. She knew the curtain had fallen on her charade. There was no turning back from the lie. "Ryan, let me explain. I was just under too much pressure. I just wanted to unwind a little." "Shut up!" Ryan's roar made Karen jump. He slammed the tablet onto the nearby desk. The dry crash signaled the end of their 2-year fake marriage. He looked straight into Karen's eyes and gazed devoid of any remaining affection, only contempt. "Right here, right now, our marriage is over. You are no longer my wife, and you are never allowed to claim to be Charlotte's mother again." Ryan turned to his personal lawyer, who had just arrived and was observing by the door. "Attorney Stone, file for divorce immediately. Charge her with severe neglect deliberately endangering a life. Freeze all joint accounts, cut up all credit cards. I want her to leave my house with nothing but the clothes on her back." "Understood, Mr. Davis." Karen heard every word Ryan said, like nails being hammered into the coffin, burying her life of luxury. Fame, money, lavish parties all collapsed before her eyes. "You can't do that. I'm your legal wife. You can't just kick me out like a dog." "Half of that fortune is mine." Karen shrieked, lunging at Ryan to scratch him. Her sharp fingernails slashed through the air, aimed directly at the face of the man who had provided her with everything. But Ryan didn't flinch. He stood still like a stone. The two police officers on duty immediately rushed over, restraining Karen from behind. They twisted her arms behind her back, forcing her against the wall. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am? My husband is a millionaire. Ryan, tell them to let me go." Police Chief Miller stepped forward, his expression severe. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The clatter of metal echoed a second time in the precinct that night, but this time it wasn't for an innocent person. "Mrs. Karen Davis, you are under arrest for disturbing the peace, and based on video evidence of neglect. You have the right to remain silent." "Damn it, Ryan. You bastard, you'll regret this." Karen struggled frantically, spewing vulgar curses, completely losing her usual fake elegance. The two officers dragged her roughly toward the detention area, walking past the cell where Mary was sitting. Karen glared at the homeless woman through the bars, her eyes full of hatred, but Mary just quietly bowed her head, not responding. The heavy iron door slammed shut behind Karen, cutting off her shrill screams, returning the main hall to its usual quiet. Ryan stood there, adjusting his rumpled suit jacket. He took a deep breath, trying to dispel the overwhelming scent of perfume lingering in the air. The anger had passed, giving way to a more important goal. Ryan walked straight up to Miller's desk, placing both hands firmly on the mahogany surface, his steady gaze boring into the man opposite him. "Mr. Miller, I want her released, right now." Police Chief Miller took off his reading glasses, gently rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked at the powerful man before him, understanding that Ryan's patience had run out. "We are processing the paperwork, Mr. Davis. With Miss Charlotte's testimony and the video footage, it's clear she is not a kidnapper. She saved your daughter's life. She is my family's benefactor. I will take full responsibility for her bail. Whatever the fine, I will pay double. I have also called my private lawyer to provide legal representation for her." "That won't be necessary. We will drop all criminal charges. She is free." Miller nodded to the officer on duty, waiting by the door. The officer understood and quickly walked toward the temporary holding area. Ryan sighed in relief, the heavy feeling that had been pressing on his chest seeming to lift. He turned to look out the glass window where Charlotte was sitting obediently drinking hot cocoa with a female officer. 5 minutes later, timid footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mary appeared. She walked with her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her stomach, her posture hunched as if trying to shrink as small as possible. The thin sweater she wore was insufficient to stop the cold from the concrete walls seeping into her skin. She stopped at the office door, not daring to step, in her large round eyes glancing around full of fear. Ryan walked closer. He saw her thin shoulders trembling constantly, saw her purple, cracked lips. Without hesitation, he took off his expensive cashmere vest and gently draped it over Mary's shoulders. The sudden warmth and the unfamiliar scent of men's cologne made Mary jump abruptly, raising her head. Her eyes met Ryan's. There was no contempt or suspicion that she often saw in wealthy people, only sincere gratitude and a hint of remorse. "Thank you, Mary. Thank you for saving Charlotte." Mary was stunned, her lips moving but unable to utter a word. She pulled Ryan's vest tightly around her, feeling the warmth penetrate her stiff, aching muscles. This was the first time in many years she had been treated like a human being, not a ghost lingering on the fringes of society. "One last procedure, Miss Mary." The officer in charge of the file interrupted the moment. He pointed to the fingerprint scanner on Miller's desk. "We need to take your prints to file the record and confirm your identity before release. It's just administrative procedure." Mary froze. Her already pale face turned ashen white. She took a step back, shaking her head frantically, her terrified eyes staring at the tiny scanner as if it were a monster. No need. Can I leave right away, please?" "Don't be afraid, Mary," Ryan reassured her, thinking she was worried about having a criminal record. "There will be no criminal charges. I guarantee it. It's just to confirm you've been released." The officer patiently took Mary's icy hand, placing her thumb on the scanner glass. Mary trembled violently. She wanted to pull her hand away, but her strength was depleted after the long night. She squeezed her eyes shut, resigning herself to fate. A loud beep sounded, tearing through the quiet of the room. On Miller's computer screen, a bright red window popped up, flashing repeatedly with a deafening emergency alert sound. Miller frowned, leaning forward, squinting to read the message on the screen. He let out a long sigh, turning to look at Ryan with a helpless and regretful expression. "We have a serious problem, Mr. Davis." "What is it? Is the machine broken?" "No, the machine is not broken. The federal data system just identified her fingerprint." Miller turned the computer screen toward Ryan. The red words, "pending deportation order," appeared clearly, sharp as a death sentence. "Her real name is Maria Gonzalez. She is an undocumented immigrant. 5 years ago, she was arrested in a raid on a hidden sewing factory, but escaped while on bail awaiting trial. She has been evading the summons of the immigration court." Ryan stared in shock, turning to look at Mary. The young woman had opened her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. She no longer looked panicked, but was instead filled with desperate resignation. She knew this moment would come. She just didn't expect it to happen, right when hope had just bloomed. "Mr. Miller, I can bail her out." "You can't, Ryan." Miller shook his head, his voice dropping. "This is not a state-level criminal offense that I can intervene with. This is a Homeland Security matter. The fingerprinting just now automatically sent a signal to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. They have activated a federal arrest warrant." The office door flew open. 2 security officers in dark blue uniforms, distinct from the local police, stepped in with cold expressions. They said nothing, walking straight toward Mary. "Step aside, sir." One officer gently pushed Ryan to the side. They pulled Mary's arm away from Ryan's vest, twisting it behind her back. The clinking of metal sounded again. Icy handcuffs locked tightly around Mary's thin wrists, brutally and decisively. "Maria Gonzalez, you are under arrest to execute the deportation order according to United States law." Mary did not resist. She let them lead her away, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking with sobs. As she passed Ryan, she looked up at him one last time. Her eyes held no reproach, no plea, only a profound sadness, the sadness of someone accustomed to being rejected by fate. "Charlotte, please take care of her," Mary whispered, her voice fracturing, before she was escorted by the 2 ICE agents through a side door leading to the specialized vehicle area in the back, avoiding the child waiting in the main hall. Ryan stood rooted to the spot in the empty room. The warmth from Mary's coat still lingered on his hand, but she was gone. He stared at the closed door, keenly feeling the helplessness creeping in. He couldn't save his kind benefactor. He sank down, feeling stunned by the barrage of recent events. He closed his eyes to regain some composure. The city of Chicago at night glittered like an artificial galaxy viewed from the 81st floor of the Davis Tower. But inside the strategic meeting room, the air was thick with the smell of black coffee and extreme tension. Ryan Davis paced back and forth across the thick wool carpet, his shirt soaked with sweat, even though the air conditioning was running at full blast. He had left the police station an hour ago, carrying the promise to save Mary, but that promise was becoming fragile against the brutal reality. Around the long oval table, 12 leading immigration and human rights lawyers frantically flipped through thick files. "The governor's on the line, sir." The assistant handed the phone to Ryan. He took a deep breath, adjusting his voice to be calm and authoritative. "Governor, I need a favor. Right now." "Ryan, I heard about the incident at the police station. I'm very sorry about Charlotte. But if you're calling about intervening with that girl's deportation order, I will fully fund your entire campaign for the next term. I will build the public library you promised your constituents, anything you want. I just need one signature to postpone the deportation order, 1 week only for my lawyers to work things out." The other end was silent for a long moment. "I can't, Ryan. She has a federal warrant for absconding from immigration court. This is a no-go zone. If I interfere, my political opponents will tear me apart in the media tomorrow morning." I'm sorry, my friend." The long, beeping tone sounded. Ryan threw the phone onto the desk, the screen shattering. It was the 10th failed call that night. From the senator to the Homeland Security Director, everyone refused. "Mr. Davis, we have reviewed the entire file." Lead lawyer James. The gray-haired man who had been with Ryan since his early career days took off his glasses, rubbing his tired eyes. He put his pen down on the table, shaking his head slowly. "The situation is very bad. Maria Gonzalez is not a victim of human trafficking by current legal definition, so she cannot apply for a T visa. She is also not threatened with her life by politics or religion in her home country, so her application for political asylum will be immediately rejected. Is there really no other way? She saved my daughter. She is a hero. The law does not consider morality in this case, sir. Her file is too clean on the criminal side, no theft, no violence, but it's too dark on the administrative side. 5 years ago, she fled after a court summons. That action is considered contempt of court. In the eyes of the justice system, she is not trustworthy to be released on bail." Ryan slumped into the leather chair, clutching his head with both hands. A feeling of helplessness rushed in, suffocating his chest. He remembered the image of his own father, long ago, the poor laborer standing outside the gate of the closed factory holding a layoff notice. His eyes filled with despair because he didn't know how to feed his children. Ryan had sworn he would never be in that situation. He had rushed to make money, building an empire to control everything. But now, sitting at the pinnacle of wealth, he realized he was still as powerless as his father. Mary didn't need his money. She needed a legal identity, something he couldn't give. The conference room door opened. The secretary entered, her face apologetic. "Sir, the ICE office just sent official notification. They have set Maria Gonzalez's deportation schedule. When? 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. A direct flight back to Mexico City." The atmosphere in the meeting room sagged. Time had run out. All legal and political efforts had reached a dead end. Ryan stood up slowly, adjusting his crooked tie. He looked around the room, full of the sharpest legal minds in America, the people who had just failed to save a homeless girl. "Thank you all for your efforts. You are dismissed." "What are you going to do next?" Lawyer James asked with concern. "I'm going to do what a father should do. I can't defeat the law, but I won't let my daughter's benefactor leave in shame like a criminal." Ryan walked out of the conference room, down the long empty corridor of the skyscraper named after him. He took the elevator down to the parking garage, leaving this powerful but useless empire behind. His sports car sped through the quiet night, heading toward the peaceful suburbs. Ryan lowered the car window, letting the cold wind slap his face to clear his head. He thought about Charlotte sleeping soundly at home, about the promise to save Mommy Mary he had made to his little girl. He knew he was about to face a painful farewell, and he needed to prepare himself mentally to explain the cruelty of the adult world to his daughter. He called the household staff, asking them to bring the little girl to the car as soon as he got home. Ryan's money and power were completely helpless against the cold legal wall. Time had run out, the deportation order had been issued. Would a miracle happen at the last minute, or would Ryan and Charlotte have to accept the painful separation from Mary? Thank you for following the story to this moment. Please continue to follow the final emotional to see the conclusion of this journey to find humanity. Ryan gently held Charlotte's small hand, trying to find the simplest words to explain the impending separation without hurting the child's tender soul. "Charlotte, we will see Mommy Mary later, but she has to go on a long trip to a place warmer than here. Be brave and say goodbye to her, okay?" Charlotte nodded, hugging her old cloth doll tightly. Her large eyes looked out the car window where snowflakes were still falling, sparsely silent but heartbreakingly understanding. The deportation waiting area at O'Hare International Airport was completely isolated from the busy passenger terminal. There were no flashy duty-free shops or the laughter of eager tourists going on vacation. Here, there were only gray concrete walls, cold white fluorescent lights, and thick reinforced glass panes separating the free world from those about to be stripped of their right to stay. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and tense anticipation. Ryan led Charlotte through the special security checkpoint. The metallic clang from the security gate and the sharp eyes of the armed security personnel made Charlotte scared, clinging close to her father's leg. "Don't be scared, sweetheart. Daddy's here." On the other side of the glass partition, a heavy iron door opened. Mary was led out by two security officers. She was no longer wearing the ripped sweater from the police station. Ryan had sent in a set of thick, clean wool clothes and a warm, cream-colored scarf for her. But the new clothes did not hide the exhaustion on the young woman's face. Her eyes were deeply shadowed, her skin pale, and her shaky gait betrayed the sleepless nights in the detention center. When her eyes met the small figure of Charlotte, Mary's tired face lit up with a strange vitality. She stopped short, then knelt down on the cold floor at eye level with the child, ignoring the yellow warning tape that read, "Do not cross," stretched across the front. "Charlotte." The call was gentle but loud enough for Charlotte to recognize. The little girl let go of Ryan's hand, crawling without hesitation under the yellow tape and rushing toward Mary. The two security officers started to step forward to stop her, but Ryan raised his hand, signaling them to stop. The father's determined look and the child's innocence made them hesitate, then quietly step back, overlooking this rare breach of rules. Charlotte rushed into Mary's arms, burying her head in her shoulder. The little girl didn't burst into tears as usual. Her small hands offered the frayed cloth doll, her most beloved toy, always carried with her to Mary. "Mommy, Mary, take Miss Fluffy. She's very warm. Let her hug you so you won't be cold when I'm not with you." Mary stared at the doll, then looked into Charlotte's clear eyes. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her trembling hands accepted the simple but priceless farewell gift. She hugged Charlotte tightly one last time, inhaling the sweet milky scent of her hair, trying to engrave this feeling of warmth deep into her soul to carry with her on the long journey ahead. "Thank you. Thank you, my daughter. I will keep her very safe." Ryan stepped closer, standing beside the two most important women at that moment. He slowly bowed his head very low to the poor homeless woman, an act that none of his employees or partners had ever witnessed. "Mary, I apologize. I have money, I have power, but I am utterly helpless in this situation. You saved my whole world, but I couldn't keep your world for you." Mary looked up, shaking her head gently. A kind smile bloomed on her lips, erasing her haggard appearance. "Don't say that, Mr. Davis. You don't owe me anything. Charlotte is the one who saved me. When my brother died, I thought my heart died with the cold that night. But when I held Charlotte, I felt alive again. I don't see being deported as punishment. Maybe God arranged for me to meet her, fulfill my purpose, and then return to where I belong." The airport announcement sounded dry and impersonal, cutting short the conversation. "Flight MX702 to Mexico City is now preparing for departure. Passenger Maria Gonzalez, please proceed to the departure gate." Mary stood up, releasing Charlotte decisively, though her heart was aching. She slowly backed away toward the automatic door that was opening, her eyes still fixed on the faces of the father and daughter. She hugged the doll tightly to her chest like a treasure. "Goodbye, my little angel. Be good." Charlotte tried to run after her, but Ryan quickly held her shoulders firmly. He squeezed her hand lightly, giving her the necessary stability in that moment. "Let Mommy go, sweetheart. She has to go home." The father and daughter stood there, watching Mary's small figure disappear behind the blurry glass door. The door slid shut, creating a permanent barrier between two worlds. Mary was gone, taking the doll and a piece of their family's heart across the border. Charlotte turned around, burying her face into Ryan's stomach, choked sobs erupting from her little chest. "Daddy, Mommy's gone." Ryan lifted his daughter into his arms, letting her head rest on his shoulder. He walked heavily out of the security area, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. He did not look back, but inside there was not despair, but a deep regret that was slowly transforming into action. Outside in the parking lot, the Chicago sky was gray and heavy. A plane roared as it took off from the distant runway, tearing through the low clouds, leaving a swirling white streak against the bleak sky. Ryan lowered the car window, watching the small dot fly southward. "I promise you this is not the end, Charlotte." Ryan's eyes flashed with determination. He pulled out his phone, dialing his private lawyer. This call was not to beg or bribe, but to initiate a much longer-term plan. A plan that would not use money to skirt the law, but use money to create a new life from the ashes. The car rolled away from the airport, leaving the separation behind, heading toward a future that Ryan was determined to rewrite the ending for. The afternoon sun in Mexico poured down on the runway of Benito Juarez International Airport, seemingly melting the tarmac, creating shimmering mirages rising from the ground. The airplane door opened, and a rush of hot, stuffy air carrying the characteristic smell of earth and dust flooded the air-conditioned cabin, rousing Mary from her daze. She walked down the stairs, tightly gripping the strap of her small travel bag, her entire belongings after 5 years of struggle in a foreign land, except for the cloth doll she clutched to her chest beneath her jacket. Mary's steps were heavy. This freedom tasted bitter. She had returned home, but home in her memory was the poor village near the town where her younger brother had breathed his last due to a lack of antibiotics, and the place she had sworn not to return to unless she had made a better life for herself. Now, she stood amidst the bustling crowds, feeling smaller and more lost than ever. A failed, deported person without money or a future. Miss Maria Gonzalez. A deep, smooth voice in standard Spanish sounded just as she passed through customs. Mary looked up, startled. A middle-aged man in a finely tailored charcoal gray suit stood there holding a sign with her name on it. He smiled a professional smile that was not lacking in respect. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" "I am Alejandro Sanchez, legal representative for Mr. Ryan Davis in Mexico. Welcome back. Our car is waiting outside." Mary numbly let Sanchez lead her to a sleek black SUV idling nearby. She had never sat in a car this luxurious even in her wildest dreams. At the same time, 2,000 miles north in Chicago, Ryan Davis sat in his 80-floor office, looking down at the city lighting up through the floor-to-ceiling window. On his desk, there were no longer merger contracts or stock charts. Instead, there were detailed architectural drawings of a medical facility and complex legal documents for a transnational charitable foundation. Ryan held his Mont Blanc pen, signing decisively in the final box of an international money transfer order. A massive sum was transferred not to buy an island or a supercar, but to build a future. The SUV drove smoothly on the highway, leaving the noisy capital behind, heading toward the suburban area of Michoacán, Mary's hometown. Sanchez turned back from the passenger seat, handing Mary a thick leather-bound folder. "Mr. Davis wanted me to give this to you personally. He said this is his sincerest apology and thanks." Mary's hands trembled as she opened the folder. Legal jargon danced before her eyes. A certificate of real estate ownership, a personnel appointment decision, a university acceptance letter. She flipped through the pages, her breathing gradually quickening. This was not a handout for her to survive. These were the ownership papers for a spacious 2-story building right in the center of her hometown, the place that used to be a dilapidated medical clinic abandoned for years. Ryan had secretly purchased it through Sanchez, hiring a construction team to work day and night throughout the past week to renovate, paint, and install the most modern medical equipment imported from the U.S. Included was a full scholarship invitation from the prestigious Guadalajara School of Medicine, a place she had once dreamed of attending but had to give up due to poverty. All tuition and living expenses were prepaid until her graduation. Centro Médico Esperanza, Mary's Hope Sanchez, said, his voice full of pride. Mr. Davis registered that name. "And you, Miss Maria, you are the executive director. He believes no one understands the pain of the poor here better than you, and no one deserves more than you to heal them." Mary was speechless. Tears streamed down her face, hot and profuse. She had thought Ryan would give her some money to open a small shop or buy a house. But he had done much more. He didn't just give her a fish, he gave her back the fishing rod, her self-respect, her dream, and the opportunity to live a meaningful life, not just exist on charity. The car stopped in front of a gleaming white building standing out among the old brick houses of the town. The sign, Centro Médico Esperanza, Medical Center of Hope, was carved in shiny brass under the afternoon sun. The glass door opened wide, revealing a clean waiting room smelling of new disinfectant, with pristine white hospital beds and a medical team busy arranging equipment. Mary stepped out of the car, her legs almost collapsing from emotion. She touched the cool wall, confirming that this reality was not a dream. She had returned not as a failure, but as a bearer of hope. Sanchez's phone rang. He looked at the screen and handed it to Mary. "It's Mr. Davis. He wants to know if you're satisfied." Mary took the phone, holding it to her ear. She could hear the gentle breathing of the man on the other end. "Mr. Ryan?" "Hello, Mary. What do you think of the gift? Is there enough room for you to display Charlotte's doll?" Mary laughed through her tears, the sound mixed with choked sobs. "You're crazy. Why did you do this? I'm just a homeless person." "You are not homeless, Mary. You are the one who taught me how to be human. Use that place to save the children like your younger brother. Don't let anyone be cold anymore." I promise you and Charlotte." Ryan smiled, hanging up the phone. He leaned back in his chair, a sense of relief spreading through his body. For the first time in many years, he felt the money he earned actually had weight. It was no longer a tool to flaunt power like the tank crushing the supercar in Nevada, but a brick-building happiness for others. That very afternoon, Mary put on a crisp white lab coat, something she thought she would never wear again. She opened the clinic door, welcoming the first patients. A poor mother rushed in carrying her child with a high fever, her eyes just as panicked as Mary's years ago. Mary did not hesitate. She took the baby, professionally checked the temperature, and gave instructions to the nurse. The image of the homeless woman huddled in jail, trembling with fear, was completely gone. In its place was a confident, vibrant, and compassionate head nurse. She moved efficiently between the beds, her eyes resolute, and her warm hands soothing the pain of those in similar circumstances. Night fell, covering both the glamorous Chicago and the small town in Mexico. The light from Ryan's office and the light from the Medical Center of Hope came on simultaneously, like two stars connecting across the vast night sky. Despite being thousands of miles apart, separated by borders and laws, an invisible, durable thread was established between two people in two different worlds, a friendship and understanding built on a foundation of mutual gratitude and salvation. Winter returned to Chicago with all its inherent harshness. Biting winds from Lake Michigan swept into the city, carrying thick snow that blanketed every street. But inside Ryan Davis's mansion, the cold seemed to stop at the doorway. The fire in the fireplace flickered, radiating a gentle warmth that stained the oak walls yellow and reflected brightly on the shiny stainless steel kitchen appliances. Ryan Davis, the man who once controlled a business empire with cold nods, now stood in front of the stove, his forehead dotted with sweat. He was not wearing a meticulously tailored Armani suit, but a blue apron printed with a cute teddy bear, a birthday gift from Charlotte. His right hand held a wooden spoon, awkwardly stirring slices of beef in a pan, his left hand secretly checking the recipe on his phone. The aroma of fried garlic and butter began to spread, overpowering the expensive cologne he once used as a protective shield. A year had passed since that fateful night. The long business trips that lasted for months, the extravagant all-night parties at elite clubs, all faded into the past. Ryan had learned the most expensive lesson of his life presence could not be substituted by the numbers in a bank account. Now he chose to be home every Friday evening, personally cooking dinner for his daughter, even though his cooking skills progressed much slower than his ability to make money. "Daddy, it's almost time." Charlotte perched on a high stool by the kitchen island, her small feet swinging with anticipation. She was now 6, a little taller, her plump cheeks rosy, and her bright eyes no longer held any trace of the fear from a year ago. In front of her, the tablet was neatly placed on a stand, the screen displaying the waiting to connect icon. "All right, Princess, Daddy's almost done. Just don't let the meat burn." Ryan turned off the stove quickly, wiping his hands on the apron, then stepped to stand behind his daughter. Just then, the video call alert sounded sharp and cheerful, like an early Christmas bell. Charlotte leaned forward, her tiny finger quickly pressing the green accept button. The screen lit up. The image from Mexico appeared vibrant and full of life, a complete contrast to the snowy scene outside the Chicago window. Mary sat there in the office of the Medical Center of Hope. She wore a crisp white lab coat, her long black hair neatly tied back, revealing a radiant and confident face. The sad eyes of yesterday were now filled with joy and determination. Behind her, through a large glass window, a sunny playground could be seen with children running and playing, their laughter faintly audible through the microphone. "Hola, Mama Mary!" Charlotte cheered, waving excitedly at the woman on the screen. Her smile was as bright as the sun, erasing all geographical distance. "Hola, mi amor. Hello, my darling daughter." Mary smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling into crescent shapes. She waved back, then bent down to pick up an object placed on her desk. It was Miss Fluffy, the old cloth doll Charlotte had given her at the airport. The doll was now wearing a tiny dress sewn by Mary herself, sitting prominently next to a medical stethoscope and a stack of patient files. "Look who's saying hello to you, Miss Fluffy," misses her big sister Charlotte very much. "Oh, Miss Fluffy has a new dress. It's so pretty, Mommy," Charlotte clapped happily. "I miss her too, and I miss you too. I got an A in art today. I drew your house in Mexico with a big cactus." Ryan smiled, placing both hands on his daughter's shoulders, leaning down to fit into the camera frame. "Hello, Mary. You look very well. How's the work at the center going?" Mary looked up, her eyes meeting Ryan's across the digital screen. There was no longer the hesitation of an undocumented immigrant, no longer the inferiority complex of a poor person standing before the billionaire. Only respect and understanding between people who had navigated a storm together to find peace. "Hello, Mr. Ryan. Everything is wonderful. This week we admitted 20 more child patients from the surrounding areas. Thanks to the new ventilator you sent, we just saved a newborn with respiratory distress this morning. You can't imagine the mother's happiness." Mary's voice trembled with emotion. Ryan nodded, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. He knew his money was well placed. Every smile, every life saved in that distant place had a part of his contribution, and more importantly, was a testament to Mary's presence in their lives. The conversation continued naturally and intimately, like family members reuniting after a long time. Charlotte chattered about school and the neighbor's black cat that just had kittens. Mary talked about the children's mischief at the center and the corn cakes she had just learned to bake. Ryan occasionally interjected a joke or simply stood there listening to the two most important women in his life share their joy. National borders, barbed wire fences, harsh legal regulations all seemed to be erased by the genuine love flowing through the internet connection. They could not live together under one roof, could not touch each other physically, but their souls were more tightly bound than any physical constraint. "It's time for Charlotte to go to bed," Ryan gently reminded her, glancing at the wall clock. "You have to sleep to go to school tomorrow." Charlotte pouted a little, but still nodded obediently. She pressed her face close to the screen, giving the camera a loud kiss. "Good night, Mommy. Oh, wait, it's still the afternoon there, right? Have a good day at work. I love you." "I love you too, my little angel. Good night." "Goodbye, Ryan. Thank you for everything." "Goodbye, Mary. Take care of yourself." The screen went black. The kitchen returned to silence, only the crackling fire in the fireplace. But this silence no longer carried the feeling of loneliness or emptiness as before. It was full and peaceful. Ryan lifted Charlotte into his arms. The little girl wrapped her arms around his neck, yawning and burying her head into his shoulder. "Daddy, when can we call Mommy Mary again?" "This Sunday, my dear, and the week after. Any time you want." Ryan kissed his daughter's soft hair. The gentle scent of baby shampoo filtered into his senses, washing away all fatigue. He felt his daughter's steady heartbeat close to his chest. This was true peace, the greatest success he had achieved. Billions of dollars, skyscrapers, fame, and power all became small and meaningless compared to the weight of the tiny body in his arms at this moment. He carried his daughter up to her bedroom, tucking her into the soft bed, covering her carefully, and leaving a goodnight kiss on her forehead. Charlotte fell asleep instantly, a contented smile still lingering on her lips. Ryan closed the bedroom door, walking toward his study. He didn't turn on the main light, only letting the light from the hallway filter in. He walked to his desk, opening the bottom right drawer. Deep in the dark corner, covered with a thin layer of dust, lay the red emergency satellite phone. It was his indispensable item throughout his years of struggle in the business world, the only link he had with his child when he was chasing fame in distant places. It was once a symbol of his concern, a distant, cold, and indirect concern. Ryan picked up the phone. The plastic casing was icy cold. He flipped it over, removing the battery cover. His finger pressed hard, pushing the battery out. It rolled haphazardly on the wooden desk. He didn't need it anymore. He didn't need a hotline to hear his child cry from afar. He didn't need a satellite device to connect with his child across thousands of miles, because he had chosen to be here. Right in this house, in the kitchen smelling of fried garlic, beside his daughter's bed every night, he had chosen to be present in every most ordinary moment of his daughter's life. Ryan put the empty phone deep into the drawer, slamming it shut. The clatter sounded like the closing of an old chapter in his life. He turned off the study light, stepping out into the hallway. The entire mansion was sinking into peaceful slumber. Outside the window, the snow was still falling thickly, covering the city of Chicago in pristine white. But inside the fire in the fireplace was still burning brightly, spreading warmth to every corner, warming a family that had once been broken, now healed and reborn stronger than ever from the storm of life. Money can buy service, but not care. It can buy justice to some extent, but it cannot bend fate or national borders. Sometimes the souls who are poorest in material wealth are the richest in compassion, and it is they who save those who seemingly have it all. Note: the story above is entirely fictional. Character names, locations, and plots have been created for the purpose of illustrating an educational and artistic message. Any resemblance to real persons or actual events is purely coincidental.